Quatermass by Nigel Kneale. Here's what the back cover has to say. In space, the Russians and Americans squander billions on pointless projects. On Earth, there's anarchy. Civilization is breaking down. Gangs of killers roam the rubbish-strewn streets. Fuel and food shortages have made the population desperate. Through the countryside, bands of mystics calling themselves the Planet People chant their crazed beliefs. Professor Bernard Quatermass, once a space pioneer himself, is an old man now. Disgusted and appalled by the state of the world, he has one final mission: to find and save his young granddaughter. She may have joined the Planet People. He follows as thousands of them converge on the ancient stone circle of Ringstone Round. It is there that he witnesses an event that defies all sanity. For Quatermass, it's the beginning of a long horror. A terrifying paranormal power has begun to afflict the earth. "That was a body!" Quatermass shouted. He leaned forward to rap on the armor glass and put his mouth as close as he dared to the crude speaking tube. "We ought to go back." The driver pretended not to hear. He was obviously pretending because Quatermass could hear the engine noise through the tube. He rapped on the glass again until arthritic pain stabbed his knuckles. He peered through the steel mesh on the taxi's rear window. The body, if it really had been one, was almost out of sight. There were only a couple of street lamps alight in the road, and one was feebly intermittent. No help to an old man's night vision. But it had been a human shape, and even in the moment of passing he'd known it was not just drugged or drunk. Now why was that? The limbs, of course, the way they stuck out. Inside the ragged clothes, it must have been swollen, probably lying there for days. "You don't go back," the driver leaned to the speaking tube. So he had heard. "I thought it was human duty," said Quatermass. The taxi's worn engine roared, and they bumped faster over the potholes. Perhaps the man had seen immediately what Quatermass was slower to do, that the body was far past aid. He was younger, better sight, quicker grasp. Just the same, a corpse lying at the side of a suburban main road, left to decay? The breath jolted out of Quatermass's lungs. The taxi thumped across scattered rubble. He managed to hold on to a grab handle. He glanced out, and in the reflected lights from the headlamps saw the remains of yet another street barricade. Burned-out cars. One had evidently been something expensive, a Lagonda or Lamborghini or the like, that Quatermass had never aspired to. "I did not indulge myself," he'd written in his memoirs, "simply because I had no time. In a larger sense, my whole life has been one indulgence. I did what I wanted to do." Memoirs were an indulgence as well. Sitting there writing in the manse, facing south over the loch where the sun, when it happened to shine, beat up refreshingly off the water, picking over the past, reusing it all, recriminations, proofs, apologies, up at dawn after the brief sleep one needed to set down what one had just remembered or dreamed, exhilarating moments of insight and invention, the old swamping horrors. As one scribbled, one slid into fierce arguments with people from another time. There they were, making their long-gone technical points about fuel lines or gimbals, and one was always tempted to let oneself win because, bluntly, one had the pen. It would go on until somebody looked into the room with a message or perhaps a bowl of soup, and one found oneself staring at them blankly because they belonged to the present. Sour-tempered Marie, and then sometimes Hetty. He should have talked to Hetty. "Hold on," shouted the taxi driver. More scattered rubble in the headlights, oil drums. The taxi jarred against one, and the thing barely moved. It must have been full of earth. That was the way they used oil drums in barricades, he'd heard. "How much further?" The driver ignored him as he clung as they rolled around another corner. They seemed to be on an elaborate route. The man must know where the worst barricades were, the no-go areas. "London is dead." The words flashed in huge, streaky letters on a wall. So why come here? That appalling journey from Scotland, was it only last week? people clinging to the train everywhere, actually hanging on the outside in hundreds, sitting on the roofs. He remembered ancient film, newsreels before the war of trains like that in India. But this was his own country. God alone knew why they were making for London. They'd passed another train, also smothered with refugees, heading back. As they limped by each other, some people fell off. It was said men had jumped from one train to the other, or had tried. "Who done it?" screamed more paint. "Who burned St. Paul's?" But it was old paint from a time when somebody might have cared. St. Paul's had gone long ago. He knew that much. No street lamps here, none at all, and the houses were wholly dark. But that was only to be expected at this hour of the night. They swung round another corner. The driver stamped on his brakes, sending the taxi skidding with locked wheels. Perhaps it was the rubble that saved them, jolting them to a halt a few feet from the barricade. This one looked solid. A pile of bedsteads, crates, railings, a wrecked van. After a shaken moment, the driver said, "That's it. Out." "Leave me here?" Quatermass felt anger rising. He had struck so much irrational behaviour in the last few days. "I can't get no further," the man said. "The studio's just down the street. You can walk it." Quatermass opened the door. Somewhere beyond the barricade there was a glow of lights. That could be the place, unless the taxi man was just setting him adrift. "I've done my best. Hurry up." "And you want a fare?" "No," the man was pleading. "Where you been, Gov? It's all paid for." Quatermass found his battered leather case and got out. "No cash carried," said the notice on the driver's door. "Just get going, Gov." He slammed his gears into reverse and the taxi went screaming back along the street. Quatermass waited, half expecting to see it crash, but in a moment more it had turned and gone. It was a mean street. Small Victorian houses typically out of London. Nearly all the windows were covered with boards or corrugated iron. Once, that would have been to keep the squatters out. Now it was probably for protection. There might still be people inside. A single street lamp picked out writing on the window boards, the remains of an ancient poster. "Curfew," in huge black letters, followed by a joking couplet to take the taste away. "Listen for the siren sound. Do not risk a nasty wound." Savage paint streaks. "Bader Meinhof rule, okay." Even that looked old. Bader Meinhof. Bader Meinhof. The attempt to anglicize the name of the German gangs. Borrowed plumage. His feet crunched in the rubble and he tried to pick his way more carefully, to make less noise. "Baders rule London." That looked more recent. And then, "Kill." Just that. Just kill. Anybody would do. He tightened his grip on the case. "Don't hurry," he told himself. "Keep calm." Shots. 3 or 4 of them. But they were distant. Another one. Yes, very far away. Silence after that. No rumble or throb of a living city. "Hello there." The voice was polite, well spoken. As Quatermass jerked round, it flashed into his mind that this was a helper, a vigilante perhaps, someone concerned for law and order. Then he noticed the young man's deliberately ragged garments, hair woven into a shock of string-like dreadlocks. But this was a white youth. "Hello, Grandpa." Quatermass felt his heart rate rising. He tried to speak firmly. Get out of my way." His upper arms were suddenly gripped from behind. He managed to get a look at another grinning face. Then a third came up from around the side and wrenched the case out of his grip. Give in. That was the advice. Let them take whatever they want. Papers, money, clothes. "All right, you've got it," he said. They all smiled at that, as if he'd made a joke and they were showing themselves politely amused. "We've got you, mate," said the young youth. His accents were still unplaceably correct. Public school, or an imitation of it. The mate jarred. Quatermass saw his case open on the pavement, clothes being pulled out of it. He brought everything with him, having no intention of going back to that filthy hotel. What's he worth? Quatermass chilled. He was not being robbed, but evaluated. I'm not worth kidnapping if that's what you... Something hit him in the face. That's for us to say. Such pain as he'd not felt for years. But he knew through it that he'd only been lightly hit. He saw brass knuckles, but there'd be no sound of cracking. Cool intelligence somewhere was reminding him that an old man's bones were brittle, that if nothing had shattered, it wasn't too bad. Not yet. Get his teeth out. Grandpa's still got his own, haven't you? So get him out. This time he saw the knuckles flash. He twisted and the blow grazed his temple. He cried out. His eyes were squeezed shut. He felt himself being swung round, held ready. He knew what came next. The pummeling and kicking that he wouldn't survive. Now it was time to plead. He said, please don't. He waited for the blows. They were making him wait. Tormenting. Please. A screech filled the street. Light flashed across the lids. The hands changed their grip. Headlamps. A car horn blaring continuously. Some kind of heavy vehicle crashing through the barricade. Quatermass found himself on the pavement. Moments of complete confusion before he realized his attackers were running. A big dog was barking. Hands again. Friendly hands. Supporting. Easy now. He tried to speak, but the words came out as an unintelligible whisper. He had to say it again. Have they gone? My dog's seeing them off. They were enjoying it, whispered Quatermass. Of course they were. Quatermass peered at him, feeling blood run into one eye. A quick, intelligent face that he seemed to have seen before. Can you stand up? Quatermass took the proffered hand. No bones cracked. That's better. Where'd you live? The question was incomprehensible. What was he supposed to say? His address in Scotland? Do you live round here? Of course. Natural to think he was a local victim. He looked down and saw his filthy hands, a sleeve ripped and hanging. He found his voice. I'm looking for the television studios. I'm supposed to be in a program. So am I. The young man smiled, and that face was puzzlingly more familiar. Oh. It could just be the same one. What's your name? Quatermass. I'm Joe Cap. Of course, they told him. Dr. Joseph Cap, and he'd remembered, and he'd been pleased. Quatermass found himself curiously self-conscious. He tried to wipe the blood out of his eye. What a way to meet, he said. Cap started gathering and scattered possessions from the pavement. Quatermass told him about the taxi. Setting you up for them? Oh, I don't think so. I think he was frightened. Cap whistled, harsh to the old man's clawing nerves, and the dog came bounding out of the darkness. A huge brute, an Alsatian with a wolf's mane, saliva dripping, and hung as it investigated him. Good puppy, Cap was saying. This is a friend puppy. Quatermass wondered foggily why he'd addressed it like that. A creature bigger than a Highland calf. It scrambled ahead of them into the wagon, which looked like something strayed from an armoured column. It might once have been built as a delivery van, but it was now smothered under steel mesh and crash bars and deflector plates. Inside it was just as rough. They had not far to go. Flood lamps switched on as they approached the massive ram-proof gate. BTV, said the sign above it, and all around were threats. Halt. Produce identity. Do not proceed without permission. Guards authorized to shoot. One of the guards came ambling out of the gatehouse, munching a sandwich. The carbine hung across his chest lent little conviction. What do you want? You're expecting us, Professor Quatermass, Dr. Cap. Cap passed their plastic identity cards across. The guard peered in. Had trouble? Yes, so please get on with it. Badder gang? Muggers. Oh, muggers. Them's just hangers-on. There was curious pride in his voice as he added, We got some big badder gangs round here. They'd have shot you up. What about you? Don't you do anything? The guard grinned. We don't go out. He signalled. The gate swung open. cab drove into the almost empty car park.